used to manage a small roadside motel off Highway 19, just outside a forgotten desert town called Dry Creek, Nevada. It wasn't much. 10 rooms, a flickering neon sign, and a front office that smelled of stale coffee and dust. Most of our guests were travelers passing through, truckers, or couples trying to stay off the grid. I took the job in 2019, thinking it would be temporary. But months passed and I grew used to the quiet. That was before Room 6 changed everything. Room 6 had been empty for almost 2 years when I arrived. My boss, an old man named Mr. Garvey, told me never to rent it out. Plumbing issues, he said, but every time I passed that door, I felt something. Like the air there was heavier, colder. Then one night, around 11:30 p.m., a young woman showed up. She was traveling alone, nervous, clutching her purse like someone was following her. She begged for a room. Every one of them was full except for 6. I hesitated, remembering Garvey's warning. But she looked terrified, so I gave her the key. "Don't worry," I said. "It's just an old room. Might smell a little musty." She nodded quickly, thanked me, and disappeared down the hall. Around 1 a.m., I was finishing paperwork when the buzz of the intercom startled me. It was coming from Room 6. I pressed the button. "Front desk. Everything okay?" Silence. Then, through the static, I heard her voice, soft, trembling. "There's someone in here." I froze. "What do you mean?" "He's in the bathroom," she whispered. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. The hallway was dead silent. When I reached Room 6, the door was locked from the inside. I called out, but she didn't answer. Then I heard the faint sound of water running. I used my master key. The room was empty. The lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the stained carpet. The bathroom door stood half open, steam curling out. "Hello," I called again. No response. When I pushed the door open, the shower was running full blast. But there was no one there. Only a wet handprint smeared on the mirror, as though someone had pressed their palm against it moments before. I turned off the water and backed out. The bed was still made, but something on the nightstand caught my eye. The key I'd given her, sitting neatly beside the lamp. She was gone. No footprints. No laggy. No sound of a door opening or closing. Just gone. I called Garvey, told him what happened. He showed up 30 minutes later, pale and shaking. When I told him about the woman, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "You shouldn't have opened that room," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Because she never left." I didn't understand what he meant until he told me the story. Back in 2007, a woman named Laura Pierce had stayed in Room 6. She'd been on the run from her abusive husband. He found her that night and strangled her in the bathtub before taking his own life. The police sealed the room for investigation. But after Garvey reopened the motel, guests started complaining about a woman crying in the bathroom and footsteps pacing the hallway. No one stayed longer than one night. After that, I refused to rent Room 6 again. But every now and then, the door handle would rattle on its own. I started locking it with a chain from the outside. Then came the night of June 14th, 2020. A storm was rolling through the desert. The power flickered, thunder shaking the thin walls. Around midnight, I heard the unmistakable sound of the Room 6 door creaking open. I grabbed my flashlight again, praying it was just the wind. But when I turned the corner, the hallway light sputtered and died. I stood there in the dark, listening. The air smelled damp, like old water. Then a soft voice drifted from the end of the hall. "Please, don't let him in." I froze. The voice was the same one I'd heard through the intercom. I shined the light toward the sound and saw a figure standing just outside Room 6. A woman, her hair dripping wet, her face pale and lifeless. Her eyes glimmered with something like sorrow. Before I could move, she lifted her hand and pointed toward me. Her lips moved silently. Then the flashlight began to flicker, and behind her, the bathroom light in Room 6 turned on by itself. The door slammed shut. I ran back to the office and locked the door. The lights kept flickering, and the intercom crackled again. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "He's here," the voice whispered. Then came a deep, guttural growl through the speaker. Something inhuman, like air forced through broken vocal cords. I unplugged the intercom and sat in silence until morning. When Garvey came in, I quit on the spot. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and said, "That's what the others did too." A month later, the Dry Creek Motel was condemned. The sign still stands there, half buried in sand, flickering at night even though there's no power running to it. Locals say they sometimes see a woman standing in front of room X's window, staring out toward the highway, her face pale, her hair dripping wet, waiting for someone who will never come. I haven't gone back since, but every few nights around 11:30, my phone rings once. No caller ID, just silence on the line, and I hear that same static hum, faint but familiar. Sometimes, when I listen closely, I swear I can still hear her whisper, "Please, don't let him in." It was in October of 2022 when the first strange thing happened. I lived alone in a small house on Willow Creek Road, tucked inside a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Raven Hollow. I'd been there since 2015, long enough to see the neighborhood change and fade. After 2020, people stopped celebrating Halloween. The houses that once flickered with orange lights now sat dark. The laughter of children was replaced by the hum of televisions behind locked doors. I didn't mind the quiet at first. I liked the solitude, but every October, that quiet began to feel unnatural. One evening, as the wind carried the smell of wet leaves and cold air, I stepped outside to take out the trash. Across the street, at the old Carver house, I saw a faint orange light glowing through the second-floor window. That house had been empty since the Carvers moved away in 2018. Everyone knew why. They said the wife had gone mad after their son drowned in the backyard pool. The house was never rented again. But that night, I saw the curtain move. And for a brief second, I could have sworn I saw a small shadow pressed against the glass. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe a reflection. Maybe the wind. But when I went inside, I noticed something chilling. My front door was still slightly open. I could have sworn I locked it. That night, I barely slept. Around 2:37 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like a child crying. Faint, distant, but close enough that it echoed through my living room walls. I sat up, holding my breath. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the hallway. I turned on the lamp beside my bed, and the crying stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against my chest. I eventually convinced myself it was the wind again, old pipes, maybe. But the next morning, I found wet footprints leading from the hallway to my back door. Small, barefoot, and smeared with mud. That was when I called my neighbor, Mrs. Harlan, an elderly woman who had lived there for decades. I asked if she'd seen any kids around lately. Her voice trembled when she answered, "No, Daniel. Nobody's had kids on this street since the Carvers left." She hung up before I could ask anything else. Over the next few nights, the noises grew worse. Footsteps creaking in the attic, whispers behind the walls, and that same soft crying. I checked every corner of my home, every vent, every crawl space. Nothing. Then, on October 29th, I decided to see for myself what was happening in the Carver house. It was just after midnight. A light fog drifted over the lawns as I crossed the street with a flashlight. The old gate squealed when I pushed it open. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. The front door was unlocked. Inside, dust coated everything like ash. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. My flashlight caught faint handprints on the walls. Tiny, childlike handprints, streaked with something dark. In the living room, I found an old photo on the floor. Mr. and Mrs. Carver standing with their son near the pool. The boy looked no older than 8, smiling with a missing tooth. Someone had scratched out his face. Then I heard it again, that same crying. This time it was coming from upstairs. Every instinct told me to leave, but my legs carried me up the stairs anyway. The sound led me to the room with the glowing orange light I'd seen before. The door creaked open to reveal a small bedroom. Toys scattered across the floor. The walls still painted sky blue, though mold had begun to spread like bruises. On the dresser, a small jack-o'-lantern candle flickered weakly, its flame somehow still alive after all these years. The crying stopped. I stepped closer and noticed something written on the wall above the bed in shaky, childlike handwriting. "He wants to come home." My flashlight flickered, and then I saw movement behind me in the mirror. A small boy stood there, pale, dripping wet, eyes completely black. He opened his mouth, and water poured out, splattering across the floor. The smell of decay filled the room. I stumbled backward, tripping over a toy car, and the jack-o'-lantern's flame blew out instantly, plunging the room into darkness. I ran. I don't remember how I got home. When I slammed my own door shut, the sound of crying echoed faintly behind me, fading into silence. I called the police the next morning, told them someone was trespassing in the Carver house. They searched it top to bottom. Nothing. The candle was gone. The wall was clean. No photo. No imprints. They said I must have imagined it. But 2 nights later, when I got home from work, I found a small pumpkin candle sitting on my kitchen counter, unlit, and beside it, muddy footprints leading from the back door to my bedroom. Now, every night around 2:37 a.m., I hear water dripping from somewhere in the house. My faucets are dry, my floors are clean, but I still wake up to that faint sound of crying, echoing through the walls. Halloween is long forgotten on Willow Creek Road, but sometimes, in the quiet, I see that soft orange glow through the window of the old Carver house, and I know he's still trying to come home. I've worked as a security guard for over 6 years now. The company I work for, Falcon Private Security, contracts us to different sites across Hollow Pines County. Thanks to my seniority, I usually get to pick my shifts, and that means quiet, isolated places. Less drama, more peace. That's what I thought. Anyway, back in late November 2021, my supervisor asked if I'd take a 2-week night post at the old Ravenwood Industrial Complex, an abandoned textile mill deep in the woods, 10 miles outside of town. The usual guard had quit suddenly, refusing to go back. The site had a bad reputation, something about the girl who died in the mill. I laughed it off. I'd worked graveyards before. Nothing scared me. The first night was uneventful. The air inside the factory was thick with dust and rust. My flashlight beam cut through old machinery like a knife through fog. Every sound echoed, the drip of condensation, the distant hum of the generator outside. Around 3 a.m., I took a break in the small security office on the 2nd floor. That's when I noticed one of the surveillance monitors flicker. Camera 4, main hallway. For a split second, a figure appeared in the grainy static. A woman, standing completely still near the far end of the corridor, head tilted slightly. Her outline shimmered faintly before the screen cut back to black. I froze, checked the monitor again. Nothing. I decided to walk that way just to be sure. The corridor was long, lined with broken lockers and rusted pipes. The air smelled like wet metal. My boots echoed with each step, and at the far end, I saw what looked like wet footprints, bare, small, leading toward the boiler room. When I reached the door, a chill went through me. It wasn't cold, exactly. It was the kind of heaviness that makes your stomach twist, like the air itself is watching you. I opened the door slowly. The boiler room was pitch dark except for my flashlight beam cutting through floating dust. Steam hissed from a broken pipe. I called out, "Security! Anyone here?" Something moved behind the old tanks. A faint rustle like fabric brushing concrete. I stepped closer. That's when I heard humming. Soft, childlike, a tune that didn't belong in that place. It came from the shadows, where the air shimmered faintly like heat waves. Then silence. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I saw her. A young woman in a tattered dress, soaked and filthy, her hair matted over her face. Her neck hung at an unnatural angle, and her eyes, completely white. She was only a few feet away. When I blinked, she was gone. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a pipe. The humming started again, closer this time, right by my ear. I ran. I don't remember how long I ran, just that I didn't stop until I reached the main gate. The next morning, I told my supervisor what happened. He laughed it off, said I was probably tired, maybe hallucinating from the generator fumes. Still, he sent me back the next night. That's when the dreams began. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same hallway. I was walking toward the boiler room again, hearing that faint humming. Only this time, when I reached the end, the woman was already waiting, smiling. Her mouth would open wider and wider until it split across her face, and I'd wake up drenched in sweat. By the fifth night, I was terrified to sleep. I drank coffee until sunrise. When I came to work that night, I noticed something strange. All the monitors in the security office were already on. The cameras showed the empty corridors, but every single one had a faint distortion, like static breathing across the image. At 2:47 a.m., the power went out. The entire building fell into total darkness. My radio hissed with static, then a woman's voice whispered through it, "You shouldn't have come back." The voice was soft but trembling with anger. Then the emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. Down the hall, one of the exit doors began slamming shut repeatedly. Bang, 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 though there was no wind. When I approached, I saw writing scratched into the metal. "She never left." My hands shook. I turned to run back toward the office, and that's when I saw her again, standing under the red light at the far end of the corridor. Only this time, she was closer. Water dripped from her fingertips, forming a small puddle that spread toward me. I could see her clearly now, her neck twisted, her jaw hanging loose as though broken. She whispered something I couldn't understand. Her mouth moved, but the words came out like gurgling water. Then, in one sharp motion, she dropped to her hands and knees and crawled toward me, impossibly fast. I ran. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned when I reached the main gate again. My flashlight was still clutched in my hand, its beam shaking violently. When I finally got home that morning, my uniform was soaked. My boots left wet footprints on the floor, though I hadn't stepped in any water. I quit Falcon Security the next day. A month later, I read an article about the Ravenwood complex. Turns out, in 1998, a worker named Lila Morrow had fallen into one of the mill's drainage tanks. She drowned before anyone could pull her out. The factory closed down a year later. No one ever drained that tank. Sometimes, when I drive past the tree line where the old factory used to stand, I swear I can still see the faint glow of red lights through the windows, and if I stop and listen closely, I can hear humming. The same tune that haunted me that night.